Welcome back, friends, to the Juicebox Podcast. Bridget has 2 children with type 1 diabetes. She's a former educator, and today we talk a lot about what goes into raising very young children with type 1. We talk about 504 plans, and we delve into how to address school shooting possibilities in those 504 plans. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Are you an adult living with type 1 or the caregiver of someone who is, and a U.S. resident? If you are, I'd love it if you would go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and take the survey. When you complete that survey, your answers are used to move type 1 diabetes research of all kinds. So if you'd like to help with type 1 research, but don't have time to go to a doctor or an investigation, and you want to do something right there from your sofa, this is the way. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. It should not take you more than about 10 minutes. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. Today's podcast is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox. You can get your diabetes supplies from the same place that we do. And I'm talking about Dexcom, Libre, Omnipod, Tandem, and so much more. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. The show you're about to listen to is sponsored by the Eversense 365. The Eversense 365 has exceptional accuracy over 1 year and is the most accurate CGM in the low range that you can get. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
I'm Bridget Tishar, and I have 2 kiddos with type 1 diabetes. My son, Teddy, was diagnosed when he was 18 months old. He's now 7. And my daughter, Liza, was diagnosed just after she turned 2, and she's now 5 years old. My kids are back to back in school, first grade and kindergarten. And I really hope to share my experience with kids, young kids in school. As previous to having children, I was an assistant principal. And so I have a little more insight into what's going to keep our kids safe and happy while they're in school. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, that's awesome. I'm happy to have you. Wait, so let me do this again. You have 2 kids. The first one was 18 months.
Yeah,
and
just a baby.
5 now?
He's 7.
7, excuse me. And the 5-year-old was 2 when they were diagnosed.
Yep, she had just turned 2, and now she's 5 years old.
Okay. Wow. Do you have any other kids?
No, we're 2 for 2, so we're set.
I was going to say, any plans for a third kid?
No, I don't know if the odds would be in our favor. So we're 2 for 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you think of having more kids before this happened?
You know, when my husband and I were married, he's the youngest of 5 and I'm the middle of 3. So we wanted to have a larger family, thinking 3, maybe 4 kids. But at the time of my son's diagnosis, when he was 18 months old, I was 5 months pregnant with my daughter. And it was just to say I was at capacity with taking care of him and then being pregnant. And then obviously her diagnosis to follow. I still am at capacity. Yeah. So we are so lucky that those 2 are our 2. But they're going to be our only 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't even get a dog if I was you.
No.
I'd be like, nothing that takes more of my time.
No way.
You just said something, I don't know if I heard it wrong. When my husband and I were married, you mean at the time you got married?
Yeah, we actually were married for about 9 years before we had our son. And so we had a lot of time to think about how we wanted to start our family. For us, we really considered finances. And we said, once we make X amount of dollars, I feel that we could financially live the life we want to live and give our children the life that we want them to have. You know, we hit that X amount and we said, maybe in 2 years, maybe 2 years and maybe 2 years. And so, like I said, we were married for 9 years before we decided to have our kiddos.
Was the extra years, were they for more money piling up or just, you just kind of didn't like get to it, or you were doing other things?
No, it was more of life. We're originally from Cleveland, and then we moved to New York City. We lived in the city for the past 10 years. And then just last year, in the summertime, we moved out to the suburbs. We traded in the city for the beach after having been married in Cleveland and having this adventure in New York City and living life there. That's actually where we started our family, in the city, to then move out here now. So it was more of getting married young, living our lives together and enjoying each other, to then decide to start a family.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I live near New York, and you see a lot of people kind of run to Jersey or Long Island or something, like when it's time to send the kids to school, right?
We're across the bay. Yeah, we're in Westport. So we're across from Long Island.
Just the idea of having your kids like walk through the city every day when they're 5 to go to school, or 6, like it's, I don't know, like, I don't think it's for everybody, but you were a city person. You lived there a long time.
Yeah.
So
we did.
What about it made you move?
It was COVID. I say, of course, as if that was the catalyst for a lot of changes with families. My husband got COVID 3 weeks into lockdown. And at the time, people were still disinfecting their mail. He had a quarantine for 10 days in our bedroom, and I was in the rest of the apartment with 2 kids. Everyone cried every day. My daughter wasn't even 1. My son was 2 at the time. And it was then that my husband thought, let's find whatever, an Airbnb, a lake house, a rental. And sure enough, this home was on the market. They weren't showing it because everything was shut down, but there was a garage code that they let us punch in and go look at it ourselves. So that was really the catalyst. And then once our kiddos' school reopened, we would go back and forth from the city out here in the summertime, and then just made that permanent move when my son started kindergarten, which is a pretty common story for New York City families.
I'm laughing about how did you choose your house? Well, it was one that was for sale and had a garage code. So
you got it. Yes.
It's the one we took.
I mean, the bar was pretty low.
This one will be fine.
Yeah. I mean, there was only so much Tiger King that he could watch to then look for a house. So it worked out well for us.
I'm a solid hour train ride from Manhattan, and I knew realtors that were selling houses sight unseen at like exorbitant markups, because to people in Manhattan who were just like, I need to get out of here.
Well, I'm going to say you're talking to one of them, but we did buy 3 weeks into lockdown. No one knew what the market was going to do at that point.
Yeah, no, not that early on. Hey, when you said everyone was crying, did you mean all 4 of you or just the kids?
Oh, no, all 4 of us. All 4 of us cried every day.
Do you think, now listen, I'm not saying you have a tiny little apartment, but when I was young and broke, we looked at apartments in the city and didn't end up getting one. Often I think back to why we didn't. And I think it was because the best one we found, meaning the best space that we found, the toilet was in the kitchen. There was like sides of the bed you couldn't traverse because it was too close to the wall.
Yes, I'm sure we looked at the same apartment at one point or another. Our apartment worked out well because our kids were still so small.
Yeah.
Where even now, by New York standards, it was a very large apartment. I don't think that we would be as loving or as kind to each other as we are in a home versus that apartment.
Yeah, it happens. When you're 2 on top of people, it's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's figure out, your 18-month-old is your oldest, so they were diagnosed first. And is there any other autoimmune in your family or type 1? Today's episode is sponsored by a long-term CGM that's going to help you to stay on top of your glucose readings, the Eversense 365. I'm talking, of course, about the world's first and only CGM that lasts for 1 year. 1 year, 1 CGM. Are you tired of those other CGMs? The ones that give you all those problems that you didn't expect? Knocking them off, false alerts, not lasting as long as they're supposed to? If you're tired of those constant frustrations, use my link, eversensecgm.com/juicebox, to learn more about the Eversense 365. Some of you may be able to experience the Eversense 365 for as low as $199 for a full year. At my link, you'll find those details and can learn about eligibility. eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Check it out. You've probably heard me talk about US Med and how simple it is to reorder with US Med using their email system. But did you know that if you don't see the email and you're set up for this. You have to set it up. They don't just randomly call you, but I'm set up to be called if I don't respond to the email because I don't trust myself 100%. So one time I didn't respond to the email and the phone rings at the house. It's like, ring, you know how it works. And I picked it up. I was like, hello. And it was just the recording. It was like, US Med. Doesn't actually sound like that, but you know what I'm saying. It said, hey, I don't remember exactly what it says, but it's basically like, hey, your order's ready. You want us to send it? Push this button if you want us to send it. Or if you'd like to wait, I think it lets you put it off like a couple of weeks or push this button for that. That's pretty much it. I pushed the button to send it. And a few days later, box right at my door. That's it. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get your free benefits checked now and get started with US Med. Dexcom, Omnipod, Tandem, Freestyle. They've got all your favorites. Even that new eyelet pump. Check them out now at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and to all of the sponsors.
So the type 1 that is within our family is one of my husband's older sisters. She was diagnosed when she was 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And previous to her, there wasn't any family history that when she was diagnosed, it was actually because she suffered a seizure, went to the ER, and that's how they discovered it. Just last year, one of her two sons, who's 8 years old, was also diagnosed type 1.
Okay.
I say my kiddos kind of are the family history. My sister-in-law, her name is Sarah. Sarah was diagnosed when she was 11, and then my two kiddos, and then like I said, last year, one of her two sons. Further information is that there's 11 grandkids on that side of the family. Of the 11 grandchildren, 3 have type 1 diabetes. 1 actually had a congenital heart defect, and there is another who has a severe form of muscular dystrophy.
Wow.
So there's a lot going on, at least in that side of the family, that really, our family in itself could be a research study. But we were familiar with it before the diagnosis.
Does your husband have celiac or hypothyroidism or something like that?
No, neither. Now, my mom does have hypothyroidism, so it would be a maternal grandmother, but nothing else within the family.
Yeah. Listen, Arden was diagnosed a couple of weeks after her second birthday. Mm-hmm. And that was, crazy enough. She must have weighed like 19 pounds right before she was diagnosed. She was down to, I think, 17 when she was diagnosed or something.
Oh my God.
But an 18-month-old, geez, it's so hard. You and I know things that other people don't, thankfully know, but it's just, it's difficult on a level it's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
But your first diagnosis was what? A few years, 5 years ago? A little more than 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. About 5. I'm trying to do that quick math. 5.5 years ago at this point.
So does your 18-month-old start with a CGM?
Yes, actually. We left the hospital on the G6. Mm-hmm. Part of the story of Teddy's diagnosis was it was over Christmas time. So even though we're living in New York City, we went back to Cleveland to visit family. And he was diagnosed on December 27th. And while we're there, sure enough, Aunt Sarah, even though she's in New Jersey, she obviously was in Cleveland visiting family as well. She came to the hospital the minute that we heard the diagnosis. We called her right away. So she came to the hospital and basically said, this is the technology you need. Don't let them tell you otherwise. You're smart enough to figure things out as needed as you go. But the technology is basically going to hold your hand as you figure it out. So we left the hospital on the G6. And then 10 days after that, once we traveled from Cleveland back to this city, we started on the Omnipod. So we were early adapters as soon as we could have been. We literally had to get the prescription filled in that time to then start the Omnipod.
Yeah. Aunt Sarah was some good advice early on.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I don't know how families do it without an Aunt Sarah because she's been such a source of content and comfort. She has the experience and empirical evidence to back up what she says, but then we also get the warm and fuzzies from her because she's their aunt. So if I could be anyone's proverbial Aunt Sarah through this podcast, then all the better.
That's wonderful. So insulin needs at 18 months, you were still able to use a pump?
We did. We started on it, like I said. We never really went through a quote unquote honeymoon stage. And as I talk to more people, it seems more and more common just because Teddy was quote unquote so far gone. Once we were transferred to a different hospital, we ended up speaking with an ER doctor who saw us, and he just told us, you were hours away from losing this kid. Wow. That's how far gone he was. So we didn't have any insulin needs, or I say like light insulin needs, or diluted. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah,
Diluted insulin needs.
I think. Okay.
No. Yeah. So we started on that pod. Yeah, 10 days after we left the hospital.
So he's in DKA, but when you look back in hindsight, how long had it been going on before it hit him that hard?
Yeah, probably. I'm going to say the first sign or first red flag that we noticed was about 3.5, 4 weeks before his actual diagnosis. And I had gone to our pediatrician for his 18-month well baby checkup. And I just said, we started on water, which is common among kids that age, in a sippy cup. And he's peeing out of his diaper. What do you recommend? And our pediatrician at the time said, there are these things called spousy pads or like maxi pads for diapers, and it'll help with absorption and he'll be great. His weight was similar to what it had previously been about 6 months prior. So there wasn't that huge weight loss, but that was the initial, again, like questioning because of a red flag, which we didn't know at the time was a red flag.
Yeah.
The urination was, we thought, due to his drinking water.
Yeah, you probably thought like, hey, he's super hydrated. This is awesome.
I mean, looking back, it's actually more embarrassing because I did think it was awesome. Yeah, I mean, he would wake up, we'd put him in his crib and he would wake up at midnight and he would be soaked from knees to armpits in his PJs because he peed out of his diaper. And we started using ASL sign language as soon as Teddy was born so he could just communicate with us. And he would be signing for water. And we were breaking our arms, patting ourselves on the back to say, look at our child asking for water. Like,
so
we're
hydrated.
transitioning beautifully. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Bridget, can I tell you, I've said this on the podcast before, but you're bringing back so many memories for me.
Yeah.
That we were heading to a family vacation and we stopped for gas. I'm going to say an hour before we got to this like beach house that my mother-in-law had rented for everybody. And when we stopped, we got this, like one of these just giant drinks, right? Like, I mean, to say it was 64 ounces is probably not even correct. It was huge.
Okay.
And Arden was just like in a car seat and she wanted it. And we gave it to her. We got to where we were going. She was done. She finished the entire thing. And I went to get her out of her car seat. So you have to kind of reach down the side to get the buckles, right?
Yeah.
And I reached down and my hands like went underwater. Like I'm not over exaggerating.
In a puddle.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, and my first thought was, oh God, she spilled this drink into her seat. Like that's what I thought happened because I remember like the cup was empty and I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like she's such a small little person,
Sure.
And then I was like, this is obviously what it is. And I picked her up and I'm like, oh, Kelly here, like, and we got her out and I unbuckled. Then I saw the seat like full and I unbuckled it from the car, took it out. I had to dump it out of the car.
Yeah.
And then like rinse the whole thing off and wash the thing. But it was all urine.
Unbelievable.
It was insane. Yeah. And still for reasons that if I stopped and think about now, keeping in mind that was probably over 18 years ago.
Yeah.
As I think about it right now, I'm like, dummy, why did you not put everyone right back in the car and drive to the hospital?
Because you don't know what you don't know.
I mean, but how do you not know that one? You know what I mean? Like that's not right. Like my brain should have said, that's not right. And,
I get it.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. And I say, I hate that I get it. And I know that our stories are so common. It's almost scary how common it is or how that progression works.
So quickly too.
Yeah. The urination to then other red flags and then the diagnosis and then the hindsight of all those red flags stacking up.
And then having somebody tell you in the hospital, that Arden's like, she's a day away from being in a coma when you bring her in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I do know, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, like, Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Anyway. Okay. So you go back to you're in Ohio though, where you're diagnosed.
Yeah. So our pediatrician was in the city, and that's where our whole life was. And so now we go to Cleveland for Christmas, and on Christmas Day, Teddy did not want to open any presents. He was so tired and showing flu-like, cold-like symptoms, labored breathing, kind of a raspy voice, cough. Didn't want to eat or drink anything. So it was a bummer of a Christmas. But the next day on December 26th, we took him to an urgent care. After going to the urgent care, the doctor sent us to get a chest x-ray thinking RSV or pneumonia. Those came back clear. Upon leaving, though, the urgent care doctor said, if he's not better by tomorrow morning, take him to the ER. That's the direction you're heading in. Sure enough, that evening, we watched Teddy's belly button get sucked back to his spine because he was breathing so hard. Now, he was sleeping, so we were hesitant to wake him up to take him, and literally just waited for him to wake up in the morning, 6:30 a.m. to take him to the ER. We do that immediately, like I said, because he didn't seem any better. And in the type 1 world, I say tale as old as time. They tried to get an IV in him, and they couldn't because he was so dehydrated. The ER doctor asked us a series of questions of signs and symptoms. And then let's say question number 6 were, how are his diapers? And I said as much. He's peeing out of them. He's soaked. And this doctor immediately responded and said, he has diabetes. We're going to take care of him. And trying to get the IV in him then, like I was saying, they couldn't. This doctor steps in to insert an IV into Teddy's neck because the other veins weren't available in his arms, hands, feet. I will tell you, I'm actually hearing this go on from another room as I am 5 months pregnant, didn't eat anything in the morning, and I'm holding Teddy on a bed. And my husband says to me, you don't look so good. Are you okay? And I say, if anyone has a banana, I would feel a lot better. So they take Teddy away from me with my husband. They go into another room. I now am starting to have tunnel vision. My mustache is sweating. And I tell one of the nurses, I said, I'm going to pass out. I'm just going to lay down here, but I'm okay. I just need to eat something. So I now never actually lost consciousness. I'm talking with the nurse the whole time. And I hear this ER doctor, I'll edit the profanity, say, let me effing do it, to get that IV into Teddy's neck because the nurses weren't able to. At that point, I did start to feel a little better as I had something to eat, and they transferred us from the hospital we were at to one with a better PICU, where we stayed for 4 days. And then we were just in a regular room for 2 more days to learn all things type 1 before we were then released.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Jeez. And at any point during this, like, when do you correlate it to, I have another baby. I'm cooking a baby right now. Like, is this going to keep happening? Is this going to happen all? Because you have to think that at some point, right?
Yeah. At no point in the hospital, though, because everything was so compartmentalized. Hour to hour. And truly, Teddy was in such a state that we, on day 3 in the PICU, were saying, when is he going to be himself? When are his eyes not going to be so glassy? I mean, it took a long while, felt like a long while, for him to come back to himself. We were actually told when we seriously asked that, when will he be back to himself? But they slowly had to bring his blood sugar down to avoid potential brain damage. Yeah. And it was only, I say after that 4th day, where Teddy seemed to come back to life. Could I think anything beyond? And so when our daughter was born, we did ask our endo about doing the autoantibody testing. And our endo just said, absolutely. But wait until she's 2.5. The results seem to be more conclusive after 2.5. Oh. And sure enough, she's diagnosed before. Yeah.
We'll give you results before then. Don't worry about it.
Yes. And so that's how we found out. Yeah, it was on our own.
Okay. All right. I see. So let's see. What'd you want to come on the podcast about? That was all very interesting. I appreciate that. And thanks for the trip down memory lane, too.
Yeah.
Jesus. I can picture myself and Arden and Kelly in different scenarios still. Like we're standing there still.
Still when she, at diagnosis, when she was 2.
Yeah.
When you picture it now, and granted, she's a lot older than my kiddos, is there a sense of time separation? Because right now I still could see or feel like my kiddos are those babies, but they're 5 and 7. So do you have a time separation of that memory to present day?
Yeah, it just makes me like talking about it. I don't know how to put it exactly. I feel tight across the top of my chest.
That's interesting.
Like on the top of my chest. Like I feel like, I don't know if this is like fight or flight or if I'm like getting ready to try to do something. I flashed to certain moments over and over again. We went for a walk through like kind of an arboretum the night before. And I remember looking back at her and thinking, God, something's really wrong with her. Wow. And I remember hanging over a balcony with a computer to steal Wi-Fi from the house next door to figure out if she had diabetes because Wi-Fi wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
I can feel sitting in a chair with my wife after they took her from us. Like I can feel my wife touching me right now, like sitting there because I was so sad. And like I've said it before here, like I felt like I could feel how sad Kelly was like when she touched me. Yeah. And I've never had that feeling before. And
would you say that that vulnerability is something that was common? Like, were you in tune and in touch with your emotions at that time to recognize what you were feeling? Or is it only in looking back that you now can re-feel and name those emotions?
No, I mean, in the moment, it just all hurt. It all felt like different kinds of physical pain.
Yeah.
Like after you realized what was happening. Like I remember like holding in crying in the emergency room.
Yeah.
And then holding it. Then I couldn't. But Arden was asleep by then. And I remember feeling so grateful that she didn't see me cry.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the moments. I remember sitting at a traffic light, talking to Kelly and saying, I think when we get there, we were saying like, she's going to have type 1 diabetes. Like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I remember saying like, everything's going to change.
Yeah.
And like, we're going to have to do a really good job. And Kelly was like, yeah. And like, but we just sat at this red light in this industrial district. And it was so, I don't know, honestly, could have been 3 a.m. when we were heading to the hospital. I don't remember the time anymore, but it was super late.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there thinking like, I don't need to sit at this red light. Like I could just go through it. Yeah. And then I just sat there instead.
Yes.
And I remember being Kelly sent me out for a meter earlier in the evening. And I had the conscious thought standing in the pharmacy, in a 24-hour pharmacy, that if I didn't leave with the meter, Arden would never get diabetes.
Oh,
like that maybe it would be a good use of my life to just stand here.
Yeah.
Like so that this doesn't happen to her. And I mean, it's silly, but like that's how I felt in the moment.
Yeah.
I had to will myself out of the store with the stuff, with the meter and the
No,
the
it's not silly. It's relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, the negotiating that I've done with myself in my own mind, or with my husband. My husband's name is Joe. I will tell you that when our son was diagnosed, it was all new to us, but he and I are both radically type A people that we knew we could handle anything. I remember thinking and saying, actually, I just want to be 90 days out. Give me 3 months of this and I'll be a pro. We're now way beyond the 90 days and I'm still not a pro. But when my daughter was diagnosed, it was only at her diagnosis that my husband was holding her. Did he cry? Because he knew what was ahead of her. Where when our son was diagnosed, I'm going to say ignorance is bliss. We didn't know the reality of it, even though we had the overarching idea. But it was when our daughter was diagnosed that a lot of those similar emotions paralleled what you were saying.
Yeah. No, I hear that, especially now that you understand what's about to happen. And not just the physical and the time and the mental energy stuff. Like that's, that's part of it. But the implications, over them, or even like, Arden's 20, and the other day we were talking, and like we're adjusting some of her medications. Her blood sugar's been higher than we wanted it to be for a couple of weeks while we're getting stuff together.
Sure.
And I was like, I need you to do this. And she's like, I'm trying, I'm studying. I was like, Arden, I need you to just take 10 minutes, stop, stop for 10 minutes. And I hate that that's what we're talking about. Because she's off at college and she's doing a really good job and she's putting all this effort into studying and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm telling her, stop studying to do this.
Yeah.
And it feels so very unfair.
Yeah.
And I know it's hurting our relationship. It's hurting her, like her experience. And yet it's the exact right thing to do.
It is. And I'm convinced, whether we're talking about a kid who's 2 or who's 20, that we as parents take it on. I say that, I'm telling my story because my kiddos will have their own story to tell. And I want to make sure that diabetes is the least interesting thing about them. Mm-hmm. And so here you are talking with your 20-year-old daughter, essentially doing the same thing to make sure she's safe and healthy. So
I was upset last night where my wife and I were talking about this in bed, and she's like, you're talking to me like I'm her right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm like, hold on,
Yeah.
And I said, this is going to sound crazy for a second, or not crazy, but just, I don't know how it sounds exactly. But when Arden's struggling with something, or I'm even seeing she's doing well, but there's a struggle ahead, or you're worried about the things like we just talked about, I picture different people that I've interviewed. Or people from the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And I look at them all as like, the idea, like, so popular in movies now, like a multiverse.
Yeah.
Right. I look at all the people that I've spoken to as infinite possibilities about where my daughter could go.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get her in the direction of one of the people whose story seems the most well-balanced and healthy.
Yes, I could totally see that or relate to that. I only recently went to a breakthrough T1D event, and there's a lot of younger parents or parents with younger kids. And then there was one woman in particular who said, my daughter's 24. I just come for the extra support. This is what she's doing, XYZ. Her daughter was diagnosed when she was about 3 years old. And I said, you're the one I want to talk to know that you have a grown-up. Like your child is now grown up. Like you've walked the walk, as I can offer any sort of support I can, almost like to newly diagnosed parents of younger children, newly diagnosed. I cannot get enough encouragement from, I say, someone like you, Scott, having Arden, or this other mom that was there at the event, because we don't know what the future holds for them. We don't know as parents how responsible they are going to be in college. So we're trying to bank as many good years as we can so that they can live like they want.
Yeah, not only that, but you can make every right move and it won't matter. Like, you still have young kids. Like, look, this is not a dig on you, but you have young children, right? And as your kids get older and older, and not that you don't see this in other personal relationships you have in the world, but you recognize that, like, you're not in any way in control of who someone ends up being.
Yeah.
Or how they take something when it's said to them, or how they traverse an experience when it's presented to them. Like, you just keep putting them in the situations and saying the things and modeling the things that you think are going to lead to some sort of like success in those moments.
Yeah.
But like, I look at, like, there's a guy right now, I won't say his name, but there's a guy I'm thinking of right now from the Facebook group. I don't know him. He's a grown man. I think about him almost all day long.
Oh, wow.
Like his life is just not going the way he wants it to go.
Yeah.
And I'm finding myself trying to figure out how to help him, even though I don't know him and he hasn't asked for my help.
Yeah.
But I think I'm trying to figure out how to help him in case one of the things I'm seeing happen to him happens to my daughter.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't think I'm really going to help. I want to be clear. I don't think I'm going to like fly in like on a white horse and save his life. Yeah.
Yeah. Very Steinbeck of you. Like, they're all my sons, as if, there's
well, it's not even like, I don't even know that like listen, this is a weird medium. I talk into this microphone. You guys take out of it what you take out of it. I'm not in control of that. Right. Mm-hmm. I hope that more people take something good out of it than not.
Right.
But for me personally, and for Arden and my family, like, I don't know. I just look at everybody as like a learning, like, again, like it's like a multiverse of possibilities of what could happen to her. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out how to manage all of it in case one of it. I mean, I don't know. Like, does this not sound like parenting really? Like, Yeah. So
was there ever a time when Arden was, I say in school, whether like elementary, even through high school, where she did actually surprise you, type 1 or not, but in the sense of you saying like, you never know who your kid's going to grow up to be or how they're going to react to something. Was there something that actually surprised you about her in a particular instance?
Surprised me like badly or
maybe just maybe just more of not what you expected. Like, here we are talking about, you don't know who they're going to grow up to be or what they want to do with their life. And my kiddos are so young that we just haven't experienced it. So was there any time that you can think of, even if she were in elementary school up to high school, where she actually surprised you with her reaction to something?
So I think that when I'm surprised by Arden, it's because she comes off so strong that when she's actually hurt by something, that doesn't surprise me, but it takes me more by surprise. Like, I'm like, oh, I didn't imagine that you'd feel that way in this. And then I remember that she's young and, like, she's got her vulnerabilities as well, but she doesn't show them to people very much. Mm-hmm. And you can get confused into thinking like, that's who she is. Like, she's, like rock, like nothing touches her kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen her break up with boys and expect like a thing to happen, and then it's not what happens. She deals with it in her very own like kind of unique way. Yeah. So when something actually does knock her over for a second, that shocks me a little bit.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
What a great quality to have. But yeah, I'm sure as a parent then that is a bigger surprise.
But also feels unfair because I recognize that everyone struggles with things, and then I feel badly for not knowing what those things are.
Yes.
Because she's obviously taxed by them.
Yeah, I say I can relate. When we were living in the city, our kids went to a private school, was, a TWO's program up through 12th grade. And so they would hold some parent seminars on how to raise a reader. And one of them, in fact, was called How to Instill Grit into Your Child. And I attended this seminar and I was like, oh man, you don't even know. Like, the definition of grit here is so relative as we're talking about, a 10-year-old in a karate championship versus these toddlers of mine that I have and what we're dealing with.
I heard some grown ladies complaining about something the other day, and I was like, is this what qualifies as hard for them? I was like, this is insane.
Yeah. It's all relative, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. When I was listening to them, like, these are things that are really taxing them. Like, so I'm not making fun of them. I'm just like, there's 9 different levels of hell above what you're experiencing, but okay. Also, that's an interesting thing. Like, how do you instill grit into somebody? Like, I've done a whole series about resiliency with Erica because I thought about that as well. And in the end, I don't know that you can just make someone resilient.
Yeah.
I think it's how you react to things. That reaction, to my eye, is built on whatever your lifetime of experiences is, how the people around you reacted, the tools you had at your disposal every time you were in one of those situations, could you afford it? Because, all the other problems that come with everything.
Right.
I don't think people just decide to be tough or not to be tough in a situation.
Yes, I would agree on that. No, I totally agree. It's all relative.
And it's what makes all this so scary. Because you could have like stood up to the first 20 things and been like, wow, bang, 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 no problem. Then the 21st thing comes along and you're like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. Or it hits you from a different angle and it takes you by surprise and you don't get back up again.
Yes, it's true. I remember, I say even before I had kids and within my extended family, there were some other just tough times and tragedies, and saying to myself, I don't need tragedy to know how lucky I am. And then here I have kiddos, and then they're both diagnosed. And it's like, I still feel that way. I still feel like I'm so lucky that they're ours. I didn't need the tragedy to know how lucky I am. And so that's interesting. I know you say that too.
Yeah. Even though you didn't need it, did it level up your perspective?
Oh my goodness. Leveled up my perspective, and then changed the weight of my vocabulary. So I might have said previously, oh, I'm tough and I'm strong. Well, now tough and strong have such a larger meaning than they originally did. Or, just to come back to grit. Like, I've always been a very gritty person, but now that grit is, to the nth degree.
I feel like I've been buried alive and unearthed myself like a dozen times.
Yes, that's it. And you might have even said before that you were resilient, but now the actual connotation versus denotation of resilient are even farther apart because of what you've come through.
I'm just always endlessly fascinated about why, like, people's reactions in situations. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like at some point in my very young life, someone told me, you're adopted. Like, people had you and they were like, here, and then gave you to us. And my mom, of course, sold it like we were so happy to. She said all the things you would say, and that are obviously true. But it doesn't negate the fact that somebody gave birth to you and was like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like I'm okay. But obviously I'm changed at the same time.
Yeah.
And then, things happen again and again and again and again. And you're okay, but you're changed. Okay, but you're changed. But I've never just sat down and been like, I give up.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so these things keep happening. I watched my son go through this for a while, like where he was just like, everything goes wrong all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that it's not going wrong. It's just everything's always changing and morphing and reshaping into something else. And it's not what you expected. And so it feels wrong.
That's it. And so it feels wrong, even though the reality is not black and white and that good versus bad. And I'll even share in talking with my therapist about this and my kid's diagnosis that I went through something very difficult and very strange. And I am now changed. Being from Ohio, I have this Midwest, almost toxic positivity, like this prima Pollyanna. And I am not that same person that I was before their diagnosis. And it's not to say I'm better or I'm worse, but changed. And so it's interesting to hear you even say that with your son in that regard of just things not going the way you maybe envisioned. Not even that you wanted, but just that you expected. Right.
I watch him, so interesting, probably around 12 years old. Mm-hmm. He was significantly more talented outfielder on his baseball team than the other boys.
Yeah.
But he didn't start. Oh. And you'd look back at it and say, well, there's a coach's dad there. There's, coach and a kid. And there's these political reasons. And you step back and really say, is that what's happening? Like, does my kid suck? Or is this like a political thing? Right.
Yeah.
And you never are going to know for sure until hindsight. But hindsight told me, okay, it was political and it was structural. And he was trying to fight through a system. Right. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Then he got to school and he was treated really well in middle school when he played. But then when he got to high school, he started off being treated well. And then he ran into a coach he came home one day and he just said, this guy's so cruel to everybody. I don't want to play for him.
Wow.
And he played for him for a while. And then one day he just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And at that point, Cole was starting in center field for his high school baseball team and playing well. And he went to the guy one day and said, I'm quitting. And Cole was on track to play in college. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm quitting. I can't play for you anymore. I can't stand the way you treat these guys.
Wow. What a brave thing.
And you would think, but then everyone on the team turned on him.
Oh, man.
And treated him poorly. So while he didn't get to play high school baseball for the last year and a half he was in high school.
Yeah.
And then he had to go off on his own, his personal time, and play baseball to keep, like, up the idea of going to college.
Yeah.
Then he got to college, and then you get to college and you realize, oh my God, the same political structure exists here that did in Little League. And you fight through it again and again. And he has this awesome senior season. And at the very end of it, God, I don't know if this is too personal, but somebody on the coaching staff apologized to him quietly into his ear for not seeing who he was sooner.
Wow.
And he said to me, he's like, that was not comforting. You mean I was who I thought I was, and you didn't see it, and you wasted this time in my life and my opportunity, right?
That probably pulled on him. Yeah.
All these things feel like everything's stacked against you all the time. And you as a parent are trying to say, look, you're healthy, you're standing upright, you got a good education, you met all these people, you had these experiences, they weren't where you expected them to be, but look, they've made you stronger. That's going to help you in the future. That's a hard thing to sell to a 21-year-old.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
And a hard thing to sell to a little kid. All this struggle is going to make you stronger. Right. And it's now he's 25, and it did. It could all worked exactly the way we thought. But I don't know if you asked him, like, would you trade it? Like, I don't know how he'd feel about like the fiery walk through to be hard at the end. You know what I mean?
Right. I do. I totally do. And then to give it the title of grit, or do we qualify that then as better? Is it worth it?
Yeah, because to him, it probably feels like, I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for him, but I would think it feels more like you outlasted these motherfuckers than I'm gritty.
Right.
This one's coming at me and trying to take my thing, and this one's trying to take my thing, and this one wants to get in the way of the thing I'm trying to accomplish. And I just didn't die in the face of their pressure. Yeah. That, I don't know if that's gritty. And also, it doesn't sound fun. But
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, is it worth it? You know, there are things that you come out of that you would say, oh yeah, it was worth it and I'm better for it. I don't know if he would apply that to the last year and a half he had in high school. Yeah,
right. It isn't until you get like one win. And then I find, like, for me personally, it all sort of just goes away then.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I don't know if it's not something to do with the timeline of our life and our expectations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, almost like the recency theory. I can totally understand that. Yeah.
Tell me that. What is that?
The recency theory is really just whatever has happened the closest to the time that you're talking about or referencing is what you hold to be true. So even if, like, you went through all these hard things, but now life is better or hunky-dory, you could say that it's worth it. And it's really just because that's where you are now. So it's the most recent. Yeah. If you didn't have long-term memory, which, by the way, is maybe shaky to begin with about how we remember things. But if I was just the person I am right now with all the thoughts in my head that I have, and I didn't remember yesterday, I don't know that it would matter. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I think you have to be able to, like, not fall down. And if you do fall down, get up. And if you do get up, keep moving and then not look back. I think all these things are true.
Yes.
It's the seething anger that you get when you look back at, like, oh my God, that happened and that happened. Yeah. I don't think about even problems I have today. Some of them are with, professionally or personally or something like that. Like, I just wake up the next day and I'm like, let's go again. I don't, like, what happened yesterday doesn't matter.
Yeah. My husband and I often, with our kiddos in particular, will say to each other, relentless forward motion. And that's what we have to do. I say to keep ourselves going, to keep them going, to make our family as harmonious as we can. We have this relentless forward motion. Yeah. Yeah. And as long as something doesn't literally kill us. Right. Or damage us to the point where it alters our ability to be who we want to be. Right. Then, you got to just take the good with the bad and just keep going. Right. Try to stare at the good and keep running forward. I'm with you. I really am. Yeah. That's awesome. Geez, sorry. We're 47 minutes into this now. Okay. Dealing with school. Oh, this is what you really wanted to talk about. Yeah. Tell me about school and 504 plans. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about 504 plans because as my kiddos are getting into what I call quote unquote real school. I mean, they were diabetic when they were in preschool. We didn't need to have a formal plan in place because they weren't being tested on how well they molded Play-Doh. Where now it's, I'm going to say, a little more serious. And so in creating their 504 plan and having my experience as an assistant principal, my perspective was maybe different, even sharper than other parents coming into this. So I really wanted to talk about 504 plans because they sound super scary. So here I am trying to be the proverbial Aunt Sarah and offering comfort with the content to say these plans are in place to keep our kids safe and healthy. These plans are in place so that they can attend school like every other kiddo. And the specifics are going to be different for every kid because there are individuals, but there are some ideas that apply to everyone, like actual testing in relationship to blood sugars. I hope that parents can recognize their kiddos have different actual physical behaviors and different cognitive behaviors when their blood sugars are obviously too low and you're in an urgent situation, but then also too high. I mean, above 180, and we can see change in my son's focus versus where he is if he's in a more ideal range. And so that can be in your 504 plan. I also want to be clear that 504s are different than IEPs. And it's nothing that we need to dissect here. There's actually a podcast called The Heartstrong, and it might be episode 42 or 43, if I can plug it right here. And they talk about the difference between 504 plans and IEPs, depending on what your kiddo needs. IEPs are just more for, I'm going to say, learning disabilities, or if your child needs extra help on a specific area of learning, where 504s are just the medical plans. And I want to stress to parents that they are advocating for their kiddos because they are the expert on their kiddos. And so these 504 plans really can be whatever you want them to be. Now, yes, the school needs to sign off on it, but you're there to advocate for your kiddo. Most schools or districts have actual 504 forms. I think a lot of parents hear the term 504 and they say, well, where do I get it, or how do I do it? You do not need to approach a 504 meeting with any documents in your hands. They will be created together with your faculty, staff, administration, the nurses in your school. That's one thing that I always came to the table with. I created an actual binder for my kids that talks about what type 1 is, how to react when the kids are at snack time or lunch, how to treat highs, what to do in an emergency, how to read the Dexcom. I even have a Excel sheet chart that if I were to fall off a cliff, you could match up the kiddo's blood sugar on the x-axis with the Dexcom arrow trend on the y-axis, and then spot them together to say, okay, no action is needed, or let's treat with 15 carbs, whatever it is. While I
Bridget, how did you do that?
Just a lot of time. I actually have to give the credit to my husband for creating the actual Excel sheet, but truly down the x-axis in increments of 10, we have it labeled from 60 up to 250. And then across the y-axis, we have each of the arrow icons from double up, single up, angled up, steady, diagonal down.
And it works?
Single down, double down. Yes. And you can match up the kiddos, again, in increments of 10. So the closest blood sugar reading they are to 10. Let's see, for example, like if your kiddo is, I'm trying to find a good example here, 90, but they are diagonal down. And according to their schedule, they're going to recess. They're heading out to recess. And my daughter, Liza, is 90 diagonal down, and the nurse can't get in touch with me. She can go to this chart to say, oh, you know what? We're going to give her 5 carbs of sugar before she goes out to recess. So for us, it'd just be like 5 individual fruit snacks. And then we know Liza is safe to go out to recess. So it was created, again, if I were to fall off a cliff and can't get in touch, or they can't get a hold of me, they don't need to. This was the nitty gritty, to use that word, that I wanted to spend a little more time talking about, though, in these 504 plans, was if there were a emergency, if there's a lockdown, if there's an active shooter. And that's where this binder or that chart would, in fact, come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And so it should be written out in a 504 plan, the best care to keep your child safe and healthy. As I talk with more parents, moms in particular, about this, safe and healthy typically for us means a steady blood sugar, that there isn't an emergency.
Yeah.
Where the reality is safe and healthy for all students is going to look different than our kiddos in those emergency situations.
Yeah, I was wondering,
lockdown, active shooter, that sort of thing.
You've been, tell me what you did professionally again.
Before I had kiddos, I had, worked in retail for a while, but then I was an assistant principal at an elementary school. And just previous to that, I was the writer for an instructional design company. So I taught people how to do their jobs, taught garbage men how to physically drive the truck, and sanitation workers what to do in a recycle facility. So lots of teaching, orientations, administrative work in that regard.
So tell me then, in a real like emergency situation,
yes,
how likely do you think it is that a teacher is going to be like, oh, there's an active shooter in the building. Hold on, let me get Teddy's 504 plan.
Yeah, right. I agree with you. That
everybody
reality,
get in the corner and let's pray to God.
You're hitting the nail on the head with a hypothetical that's actually real. So I wouldn't call it hypothetical. Your example is exactly what we're referring to. And so I've worked with, obviously, my kiddos' teachers and other teachers I know to say what is going to be the best and the easiest way to take care of our kids in emergency situations. So every classroom, I'm going to say across the country, it has like an emergency go bag, and it's where they keep all of the kids' emergency contact. I feel like I only remember my teacher bringing it like if we went on a field trip. But this backpack is in the classroom and would be wherever the lockdown location is for the kiddos. And so we keep this binder in those backpacks in the respective classrooms where my kiddos could be for reference. I do send an email to teachers, a digital copy, because it's so hard to talk about that you don't want it to be real. But we have to keep them safe, where if my 5-year-old is being escorted through the hallway as an active shooter is in the building and her teacher pushes her into a art supply closet, that emergency backpack is not going to be there, but the teacher would have her phone on her.
Yeah.
So she could pull up that digital copy. My kids do wear spy belts throughout the day. And so they hold their medical devices, extra fruit snacks, things like that to keep them safe and healthy. But it has to be thought of as their parents. There is a Nobel Prize winner in economics, I think from 2009 was the year. And she said that there's no reason that bureaucrats, no matter like how well-meaning or like how intentional they are at solving the problem, they don't have the strongest incentive to get the solution right. But we as parents do. And so, just from my experience and then having the 2 kiddos put me in the unique situation to share that,
I feel like they write it all down. They're like, it's all written down. It's going to be fine. And then when the time comes, nobody can find it. Nobody knows what it means.
Yes, you got it.
I'm going to tell you right now, maybe this is wrong. Okay. But here's what I told both my kids.
Yeah.
I said, if you're on the first floor, I want you out the window, zigzag to the tree line, go about 10 feet deep into the trees, make your way out to the main road, and then get back to the house. That's
similar to Alice training. If any other parents or kiddos are familiar, you got it. Yeah, that's called similar to Alice training.
Arden, I told, bang a juice box, jump out the window, zigzag to the tree line. I don't know what else to say. I have had so many conversations with so many people in so many different situations where they have been what they thought was prepared, or they have been with people that they thought were going to be rock solid in the moment, and then they just weren't,
Yes. We actually have told our kiddos the same, that if ever in doubt, they can have more fruit snacks or an extra juice box, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We've even gone as far as we tell the teachers, like all of their devices, if you're in a true lockdown, all of their devices can be powered off. People for decades were handling their diabetes without the technology, so it can be done. And we have said, power off their devices and give them 5 fruit snacks I forget what we said, but it was something like 30 to 60 minutes until it's safe to turn them back on. as if like we'd rather have them running high than running low.
Yeah, you'd rather see your kid with a 300 blood sugar than beeping that draws attention to them.
Exactly. And I say, you're right. For the beeps and the boops, I mean, I had to tell my 5-year-old she can't wear her light up unicorn shoes to school because, God forbid, she applied an extra ounce of pressure to her heels while in that supply closet to give away her hiding spot because of her light up shoes.
You know, it's funny.
And so
I see, listen, I know how often this happens, and I know that preparation is probably key, but at the same time, you think that, I don't know, percentage wise, this is not going to happen to most people. And then there's like that other side of it is like, are we freaking out a generation of people to be ready for a thing that may or may not happen to them? It's such a hard thing to think about. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. I do know what you mean. We live a stone's throw from Newtown, Connecticut. So yeah, I do know what you mean because we know those parents. We actually, I say have an acquaintance of one of those teachers. So yeah. Yeah, your
distance from where it happens really does change how hard it hits you. Like I'll talk to people I know that are from like the middle of the country, and you talk to them about 9/11 and they're like, well, it was like really scary and all, but like it doesn't feel as real because I don't know anybody was there. It's really interesting.
I think that's more than interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I'm talking about back at the time. I'm sure now with distance of time and years, they understand the impact of it. But right as it happened, they were just sort of like, oh, it's weird. Like you know what I mean? Like it hit them differently, I think.
Yeah. A news story as opposed to.
Yeah. A thing that whereas I could have walked out in my backyard and I could see the column of smoke for like days.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I say exactly. And so to talk about this and to bring it to parents' attention, to then relay it to the school administration, hopefully will never have to be put into practice.
Right.
But I know that I feel better with more information. I want to know as much as I can. And then potentially cherry pick what I actually apply. Yeah. But I want all the information to then decide what I'm going to do with it. And so that in particular, in that sort of situation, I say put in the same category as the advice that I tell my kids. They are never allowed to be the first one out the door for a fire drill. I said, you are never going to walk out first. You always be the last one out. And it's for what we've learned through actual, not drills, but active shooters. And I'm only going to be as prepared as I possibly can for the best outcome that could possibly be through all things in my control.
Well, listen, you're going to hear an episode on the podcast next week that's going to absolutely fry your brain for your preparedness because a woman came on to talk about how her kid left her phone in the car before she got on the bus. And so the mom had to call ahead to the school and say, look, until I can get the phone there, just go to the 504 plan, handle everything with shots, and et cetera. And by the time she got to the school nurse had given her daughter 150 units of insulin.
No.
Yeah. Wait till you hear it. It's crazy.
Oh, man. Yeah. I say I can't wait. I'd ask you what happened, but that'd be some major editing for you.
Yours will come out way after theirs, but I don't want to give it up for the people who are just hearing it right now.
Yeah, no problem.
But I'll tell you if you're listening and you're interested, you are looking for episode, give me a second. You were looking for episode 1323. It's called School Nurse Mistake. So
unbelievable. Yeah. We actually had an instance at summer camp this year where there were multiple T1Ds in my daughter's camp group. The wrong remote was used on the wrong child. So I received a text message that said, Liza passed on snack today. And I said, no problem, nothing needed. And then about 20 minutes later, I got a phone call that said, we made a mistake. We actually dosed her for a friend's snack count, but your daughter did not actually eat anything.
Oh, I have another episode coming up about a camp.
Oh my God.
Where the kid was crying for 3 solid days, sick in DKA because they weren't giving her enough insulin.
Oh boy.
She finally just cried so much somebody called her mom for it because they weren't supposed to call the parents.
Yeah.
And then later in hindsight, they find out that like every stopgap that was in place at this I'm not going to say the name of the camp, but respected diabetes camp. Okay.
Oh boy. Okay.
Every stopgap they had in place to stop these things from happening failed all the way straight through.
Oh, wow. That sounds like an expensive lawsuit.
Yeah. I don't think that's what they're going to do, but there that happened. So the kids running around like, you know, with like ketones and super high blood sugars and all this stuff, sick and crying and they only like, and they weren't going to let the kid call. Like she's like begging to talk to her family and they won't. They was like, no, it's against the rules.
Oh my gosh.
So, anyway.
I couldn't imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like everything being written down and planned out. But at the end, my expectation is you're in this on your own and you should know the things that you need to do. And it sucks because you're talking about young kids, you know?
Yes, exactly. And training my kiddos, teachers or camp counselors, whoever the grown-up is in charge, I tell them 504s aside, paperwork aside, these are the 2 takeaways. 1, how to read a Dexcom. If you can interpret that arrow trend, then you can be ahead of any potential urgent situation. And then 2, how to treat a low. Treating a low is more, I'm going to say important or has to happen quicker than correcting a high. And so with those 2 takeaways, hopefully families can feel a little more comfortable when their kiddos are away from them, whether they're at school or whether you have a new babysitter, you know, or whether, you know, I'm trying to think of a different like caregiver situation. But with those 2 takeaways, how to read a Dexcom and how to treat a low, there's a lot more confidence that comes that grown up or the caregiver can have to know that the greatest medical intervention that the neighbor across the street could do while my kiddo is playing in their backyard is give them a juice box.
Yeah.
Is easy and comforting as opposed to anything with pokes, needles, syringes. Yeah.
I would also like to say that my expectation is in most of these situations, it's going to go well enough that you're not going to be in a dangerous situation. But
yes,
I mean, I put a fairly thoughtful 504 plan in place when Arden started school. And they said, no, this is the 504 plan.
Really?
These 5 bullet points that I actually said to them in a meeting, I was like, if you think those 5 like ideas are going to keep her alive, I'm like, you're out of your mind.
Oh my gosh. How did they react? What was their response to
I was a pain in the ass to them. Right.
Yeah.
But that's how I felt to them. I made them like call her down before recess in kindergarten every day and test her before she went out. She didn't have a CGM. Like she would just get a meter test before she went out, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then after they tested her, they had to call me to decide what to do next.
Yes, because we text throughout the day with our school nurse.
And this, I'm old. This was before texting. Even though 4 kids at a store yesterday said I looked like I was in my mid-30s, but that's another story.
Yeah.
And then I had a timer on my phone because if my timer went off and I hadn't heard from her, it was beyond the time before recess. So we got beyond the time. I called the nurse's office. I've told this story before, but the nurse picks up the phone. I said, hi, it's Scott. And she goes, oh my God, Arden, and hangs up the phone.
Yep, I get it.
She calls back minutes later. Hey, I just got Arden off the playground. We missed her. You know, some poor kid had like a problem, like literally like a problem with his heart, and they had to they had to do something. And so it happened right at the same time that Arden was supposed to get on recess. So the nurse never called down to the room. You would say, well, why didn't the teacher send her? She sends her every goddamn day. How come not? Because that phone call didn't come, so she didn't do it.
Right.
And why didn't Arden say something? Because she's 5. And so the nurse runs out on the playground, finds Arden at the top of the monkey bars with a blood sugar in the 50s.
Oh, my goodness.
And brings her in and straightens her all out and everything. And I took that moment. I actually got dressed, went to the offices where the administration was, sat outside of the office of the superintendent. And I said, I'm here to speak with the superintendent. They told me I didn't have an appointment. I said, that's fine. I'll wait. I
Did
waited.
you say it was in regards to potential homicide?
And so I went in.
That might have helped.
I laid out everything I had tried to set up with this 504 plan. I actually tried to set it up the year before Arden started because I knew it was going to be a thing. They kind of laughed me out of the building at that point. And I said, this is what I want. Here it is. And nothing was crazy. And I said, and it seems like maybe there should be an aide like that, looks in on Arden at certain times because obviously her teacher can't handle it and the nursing staff might have a different problem.
Right.
And he said, we can't afford that. And I said, do you think you can afford it more or less me suing you till the end of time?
There you go.
And I said, because I'm not a litigious person. I've never actually been involved in anything like that. It would be my joy of my life to not be involved in anything like that. Right. I said, but if you kill my daughter, I have to assume that the sadness and grief that I will feel will only like I'm doing something valuable with it if I just keep going till I put Arden's name on the front of this building. And this is the Arden Benner High School one day.
Right.
And I have all of your money and none of you work here anymore. Mm-hmm. And I said, because I can't imagine that I'm going to be able to get up and focus on anything else. Or you could just pay the aide.
Right.
And then it was all fine forever and ever after that.
Well, I don't know how it compares to make you feel good about it or that much worse. But I'll tell you, at my kiddos' elementary school, when Teddy started there last year in kindergarten, he was the third diabetic within the school. So there were 3. And now this year that my daughter's there, there's 4. Well, because there were 3 last year, the school did hire an additional part-time nurse. And that nurse is at the school from 10 until 2 because that runs the gamut of snack times through all lunches.
And then probably a little bit afterwards, after some of their lunches
actually,
as well.
It does actually cover, a little bit after.
That's awesome. Yeah, see, there's the right thing to do in that situation. Like you have a responsibility. You need to have a staff person there to manage that responsibility.
Yes, and their numbers are tracked. And now all these details I'm giving you, I'm not saying they're directly in the 504, but I'm referring to it because this is how we manage then the day-to-day routine. I really hope that the day-to-day is boring. And so we spend the majority of the 504 on those potential situations or emergency situations or field trips, like something that's an anomaly. Mm-hmm. But talking about these details and referencing what we do with my kiddos, I hope will just help other parents. And so there is an actual school nurse iPhone. And so the nurse has all 4 diabetics on that school phone. So she doesn't have to follow on her personal phone, and basically keep it within the 4 walls of school. We text when they arrive. I say they're in. We text when they leave. And I say, I got them, so that she knows when she's quote unquote on and off the clock with my kiddos in particular. And that is how we best keep them safe and healthy. Just real quick in regards to the field trips, we have it written in that I, as the parent, either myself or my husband, we have the right to first refusal to not go on a field trip. It's always assumed that we will be attending the field trip.
Right.
My first grader, he told me he didn't want me to go with him this year. And so I didn't, but that meant that the part-time nurse did go with him because he always has to have someone, obviously, a grown-up to take care of him. And so that instance is also written into the 504. I really could talk to you forever, Scott. I feel like it's the best celebrity encounter of my life. But I just want to mention one other thing in the regards to the 504 plan, as we talk about lockdowns and different drills. There typically with schools is an evacuation site. And when I talk to other parents about this, they are clueless and then so appreciative. If there were something horrible that happened at a school and they needed to remove the children, not just, like if there were a true fire, not just a fire drill, but a true fire, and then you had to go pick up your kiddos, there's not going to be a filing through of the school grounds. Find out where that evacuation point is for your child in their school and potentially put a go bag at that location. For our kiddos, it's like a furniture store. And so I have a mini backpack there, if you're talking with the store manager, to say, this is my kids' names. This is where we can put it. And so if there is an emergency and there were a fire at my kid's school, I could even get in touch with the local fire department to say, hey, I know this school is evacuating to the furniture store. Please make sure whatever is needed, and again, that's if there isn't a grown-up around or something can't be there. I think
somebody's going to think that sounds crazy, but it seems brilliant to me.
Yeah,
that's
and it's
awesome.
Something that you don't know until you don't know.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Oh, what a great idea. Oh my gosh.
So that's just one other important point, that I wanted to mention, because again, the day-to-day hopefully is boring, but there are those other situations that if we are over prepared, we can feel that much more happy and secure.
No, I mean, I've told people every year through entire time Arden was in school, like, I know this all probably seems like insane. I was like, but we're not prepping for the things we expect. We're prepping for the things we don't expect.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of it's going to be okay day to day. We've got that all kind of worked out already. Like we're trying to be ready for the things that, are just going to surprise the hell out of you.
Yes.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you're thinking of it that way. And I like you raising attention to it too. Thank you.
We're trying.
Yeah. So, no, you sound completely reasonable till you said I was famous, and then that part you sound you sound a little silly. But other than that, you sound perfect.
Got it. Yeah. Sure.
That's very nice of you. Okay, listen, this was terrific. Did we not talk about anything we should have?
We touched on so much, even drawing parallels. Arden to both of my kiddos is radically helpful for that day-to-day, what school and T1D can look like as they grow up. And it's wild for me to, think that far down the road with my kiddos. As, like I'm texting with the nurse right now about snack time and who needs what. So it was really great to talk with you.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. I enjoyed it as well. Well,
yeah,
thank you so much. No, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you. Will you hold on for a second for me?
Absolutely.
Thanks. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast was sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get started today with US Med. Links in the show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365 CGM system. 1 year, 1 CGM. That's the Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Hey kids, listen up. You've made it to the end of the podcast. You must have enjoyed it. You know what else you might enjoy? The private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast. I know you're thinking, Facebook, Scott, please. But no. Beautiful group, wonderful people, a fantastic community. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. Of course, if you have Type 2 or you're touched by diabetes in any way, you're absolutely welcome. It's a private group, so you'll have to answer a couple of questions before you come in. We'll make sure you're not a bot or an evildoer. Then you're on your way. You'll be part of the family. Thinking about getting an algorithm pump? Don't know where to begin? Juiceboxpodcast.com. Up in the menu, click on algorithm pumping, and you're going to get a long list of a lot of episodes that will help you to understand better. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Find algorithm pumping. I can't thank you enough for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed or following in your audio app. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.